And there you are. You're in the screen. Welcome to the program, Jason McLean.
Hey, glad to be here. Been having a little fun. By the way, it's Robert Francis O'Rourke, not Beto. Beto was the nickname his father, a political judge, gave him as a kid to make certain that he got the Mexican vote when he ran for office eventually.
Well, that's good. What was it? William, what now?
It's Robert Francis O'Rourke. That's his real name.
Robert Francis Turd Eater O'Rourke.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Well, you could say dirt eater too. Man, what? Talk about a piece of work, man. I did some crazy. Man, there are some crazy things going out there, Jason McLean, and I appreciate you watching the Randy Points. But I tell you, we're going to have a time tonight with you. We're going to be talking about how UFOs and Bigfoot prove the Bible is true. But Jason, just go ahead and tell us a little bit about how you came to write that book.
Good. Finally, on to some sane topics now that we've left the Democrats. Honestly, what had happened is after several years of talking to different pastors, different friends I've had, one of the things that sort of it kept becoming a current theme is Christians don't want to talk about this. Mm-hmm. They don't want to talk about Bigfoot. They don't want to talk about anything truly paranormal, right? Some people, some creationists may dip their toe into a little bit of cryptozoology every once in a while, out of place artifacts, things like that, but by and large, they don't want to touch them at all because they don't want to be seen as crazy by people who believe that the universe blew up spontaneously 12 billion years ago on a Tuesday, and now we have Democrats running around. And so it occurred to me that so the Christians aren't going to really stand up and have this conversation. Then somebody needs to. Let me rephrase this. The professional Christians are going to stand up and really have the conversation because there are some people who are doing it. Then somebody needs to get the conversation started. And the problem that I saw also is the people who were having the conversations were getting very, very intense and very deep into the material, right? Mm-hmm. And the problem is a lot of people, that's what's keeping people away. It's like when you're talking about cars and you're handing somebody a full-blown schematic, right? They're not going to be able to understand it. They're like, this is too much information. So the book is inherently short and really it's a primer. It's an overview of the conversation that we're having. Mm-hmm. In order to sort of say, hey, if you're a Christian, here's the perspective you need to have. But then also if you're a non-Christian, the different Forteanologies, right? Cryptozoology, ufology, paranormal psychology. All of it tends to avoid anything that doesn't agree with their preconceived notions, mm-hmm. right? Particularly when you get into ufology, you can have a typical, abduction experience, but then they call out the name of Jesus and the abduction ends. Well, they'll discredit that entirely. Mm-hmm. If you're a cryptozoologist, you're hearing the story or an account of a hunter tracking Bigfoot through 3 feet of snow, and then they're tracking the tracks, and they keep going, and all of a sudden, spontaneously, in the middle of a field, the tracks stop.
Okay.
They don't want to talk to you anymore.
Right.
And the reason for it is both instances question and draw into question their preconceived notions about what's actually happening. And the problem is the Bible gives us a framework for understanding all of it. But the Christians aren't there to talk about it. So we need to have Christians in the conversation providing that framework and being able to say, hey, let's have this full open discussion. I change my mind all the time on things. There's always new information coming in, but we have to have that honest conversation for that to happen. So that's why I wrote the book.
Wow. All right. Well, that surely is an interesting take. And I would say forever, Christians have sort of gotten away from those type of questions, like they're irrelevant. And you're right. It's like it's like fringe. But today, what's going on, particularly with UFOs? Everybody has cell phones. There's more pictures. There's more eyewitnesses. Mm-hmm. In fact, we're having eyewitnesses coming up in the next couple of weeks. My wife and I went to a Gen 6 conference, and in that conference, they asked a question to 3,000 people, obviously predominantly and probably mostly all Christians, said, have you seen inexplicable sightings of any kind, whether Bigfoot or UFOs, whatever? And an amazing amount of people. But, stood up. And now in this environment, though, that gets away from the sort of the name it, claim it business, which has dominated Christianity forever. Everybody wants to feel good. Nobody wants to know about the end of the world. Nobody wants to know that there's a UFO getting ready to abduct it and perform hideous experiments on them. And of course, Bigfoot's a big joke, but you know what? The Bigfoot now seems to be, and may be able to give us your perspective that it may be a possibility of an interdimensional being. But with CERN online, CERN wasn't back here 10 years ago. Who knows what portal and what is coming through that portal into this dimension?
No, absolutely. And I think what's really happened is the Bible itself is an inherently paranormal book. That's just the case. And I think the problem is a lot of people on the Christian side, in this endeavor to be loved by atheists and embrace the material sciences, right, or the sciences that are proved by the academia, we've rejected the paranormal entirely. Well, the problem is if you're rejecting the paranormal, then you are ultimately rejecting the Bible. It's an inherently paranormal book, which is why Christians have lost power over the last century. Not just, our political power isn't because we voted better. It's because Christianity was creating better people, and it had the power of the Holy Spirit. That's what created this nation in the first place. We were out there making arguments. We were, it wasn't just the argument that was done properly, which we're not doing anymore anyway.
Right.
It was the argument done with power, and that's been entirely rejected by pop culture Christianity. And so you have people being abducted, right? And there's no conversation that's really being had. And so when people who are nominal Christians, or we hear all these stories of people who are Christians being abducted. Well, if you look at the people who are being abducted who are Christians, they go to church once a year, or maybe 2 or 3 times a year. They certainly aren't, going to church every Sunday. They don't have an actual spiritual life. They are nominally or culturally Christian. And so when something happens to them, they want to turn to somebody and say, hey, what's happening to me? But the church has thrown out the paranormal. And so by doing that, we leave these people open to mistreatment by the supernatural. And so it's going to lead them astray. And I think that's ultimately the goal. At the end of the day, the ancient astronaut theory crowd that's the new religion right there, is this ancient astronaut theory, because it's going to come, and it's an easy way, and we may be getting ahead of ourselves in this, but let me just go ahead and put all my cards on the table. It's the easiest way to reunite all the world religions pretty much overnight. Because what is the theory behind ancient astronaut theory? Well, that aliens came, they manipulated us genetically, created humanity, and that all the world's religious texts is just misunderstanding of their contact with us. Okay, well, you've just said every religion is right, but every religion is wrong. Let's all come together and figure this out. And it's going to be real hard. I keep telling this to people, and I'm like, look, there's a day coming. It may be something as subtle as the Pope standing up one day and saying, hey, aliens are real. We've known about them for a while. A lot of our religious texts are based on them. Traditional Christianity is not really a lie, but it's not entirely accurate. Or maybe something as dramatic as a mile-long spacecraft hovering over some major city somewhere saying, hey, my name's, Klaatu, and we made you. Right? I mean, it could be any of those. It could be anywhere in between. My question is, what happens the Sunday after that event?
Right.
Honestly, I can stand in any church and within 15 minutes use the stuff that ancient astronaut theorists put out and give at least half the people sitting in those pews an existential crisis within 15 minutes. They'd be ready to chuck Christianity the whole 9 yards. Why? Because they've not come in contact with these arguments. They've rejected all these things. And the problem is, if you've been rejecting something your entire life and no one's told you, hey, this stuff's out here, here's how you fight it, here's to understand it, it's going to be real easy to be led astray. So that's what the book is about. I mean, it's very, very short. I want to make it very easily understood, and really give people that opportunity to understand the concepts that are, and then go and share it with their friends, and say, "Hey, you're missing stuff."
Well, that is true, and I was thinking about that as you were talking about how that there is information coming out from the secular sources, and when it comes to spirituality, it does seem that the Christians should have wrote the book on it, so to speak. But instead, what's coming out of there is I mean, I guess there is what I would call a boot camp that I would say Christians need to go through. You know, life of Paul, life of Jesus. You know, these kinds of things, some foundational principles. But then it says go on to the meat of the matter. Okay, well, the meat is the heavy duty spiritual things. So many people are happy and content down in the milk that they never get to the meat, and the meat is the heavy duty spiritual things, and the people out there are thirsting for that meat, but they can't get it. All they keep, and you know what? If you gave milk to a baby, it would be a scrawny looking thing, and it wouldn't be very healthy. You've got to give them some meat. You've got to give them some protein. You've got to give them those deep spiritual truths, and that will lead you into, are there UFOs? Are there Bigfoots? What would be the reason? What is the Christian response to those things?
Oh no, absolutely. In fact, I'd even take it one step further. We're not getting just milk. What we're getting is watered down milk. Because if you take your Bible seriously, you run across the Nephilim in chapter 6 of the Bible. Before Noah, when everyone's learning about why Noah's flood came, they're right there. If you understand the Book of Enoch, which was part of canon, once upon a time, if you understand what Paul or what Peter is saying in his epistle, basic teachings of the Bible should tell you that these things are real. These supernatural creatures are real. The Nephilim are real. And here's what they mean. You don't even have to get very deep into it. Just say, hey, this stuff exists. And by the way, this is how you understand the Old Testament. How often, in fact, I put this in some of my earlier books about that you have up on Understanding Revelation and the Antichrist, some of those books. One of the things I point out is I forget the name of the atheist now. He's real big. But anyway, he talks about how God is some murderer, right? That he's careless, capricious.
You're not talking about Bill Nye the Science Guy, are you?
No, not anyone that's stupid. I'll remember his name later. Anyway, but he talks about how unlikable the God of the Old Testament is because he's always destroying things and killing people randomly, and he's genocidal. And the simple fact of the matter is, if any Christian should be able to look at this guy and say, you're out of your mind, here's why. Here's why the flood was necessary. Here's why when they went into the Levant, they had to kill everything. And explain it simply. You don't have to be a scholar to understand these things. Basic understanding of what the Nephilim are and what they did tell you why they had to be destroyed, where Goliath comes from, why Sodom and Gomorrah had to be destroyed. They're all connected. And it's really, like I said, it really isn't advanced knowledge. This is really simple, straightforward stuff that the church is completely ignoring.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask something. So, and I don't want to jump the gun here, but in general, what is your take on UFOs?
So, my take on everything, UFOs, is there's always more than one thing happening, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is a lot of this stuff is very complicated. UFOs, I think, come in at least 3 levels of events, right? Mm-hmm. You have genuinely supernatural events, right? You have like spheres, right? These glowing spheres that do incredible things. I would say that those are supernatural creatures. You can call them angels, you can call them demons. I'm slightly trained in archaeology. So I like to be a little bit more specific. They're at least supernatural creatures, right? And those are the ones that really do fantastic things. They can change shape. They defy all known laws of physics. Those are supernatural. Then you have material craft, right? These are hard, solid objects. One group is clearly black ops, super advanced technologies that we're trying to perfect. That's clearly one set of them. But the other set, I think, are physical craft, but they are not man-made. And let me rephrase that. They are not made by humans operating publicly under governmental supervision. These are material craft made by, they may be quasi-human, but creatures that do not take orders from the government. These are creatures that are taking orders from the first group, the supernatural group. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where, again, and there may even be some overlap. I think that some of the physical craft may even provide conveyances for certain supernatural groups, entities, but we don't know. I can't say that for certain.
Well, you mentioned a mile-wide craft. Of course, I always think of the Stevensville sighting, and that particular mile-wide craft, it took forever for the local Air Force base to say, "Oh, it was us." They were denying it forever, and then say, "Oh, yeah." By
Oh
the way,
yeah.
I think obviously it was meant to just shut up the questions there, but too many legitimate people saw that craft. They included ranchers, some of my favorite people,
Hmm.
you know, preachers, whatever. I mean, there was, farmers, everybody out there saw that, and
Hmm.
to say it was, I think one of them was said, one of the theories was, or explanation, not even theory, but they said, well, it was a
Right.
reflection of a 747. It was a reflection, and that's why you
Yeah.
didn't hear it. Oh, okay, it's got lights, it's triangular, it's a mile wide. Sure, it looks like a reflection of a aircraft. Why not?
No, Stephenville is actually not that well. Okay, it's as far as Texas goes, it's not that far from me. It's a couple it's a couple hours away, and it's actually the first UFO comic strip I did. I was doing some work for a local comic or a local newspaper at the time, and I did a comic strip on it. And it's the Stephenville case is very very interesting because you're right. The reason the government had to admit that something went on was because too many people saw it. It was far too public. And like you said, these weren't, some drunk people out in the middle of nowhere. It was police officers, it was pastors, it was dozens and dozens of people who saw all of it. And a lot of it got on camera, right? Particularly when you have the aircraft. And so they had to admit something was going on. And people even went out and got radar catches from that evening, from weather radar. And they were able to show airplanes in the air, fighter craft. And so it's one of those things where it was so public that it couldn't be denied. But as I mentioned in my book, one of the things that the bigger issue though isn't some stuff like Stephenville. It's what happened. Well, 2 years ago now. Well, a year and a half ago. Last December or December of 2017. Sorry, it's so early in 2019. I'm still thinking that 2017 is last year. Um, but the government came out and said, yeah, UFOs are real. And not only are they real, we don't know what they are. We've been pursuing them, trying to figure out what they work, and they interact with our nation with impunity. I mean, the government said that publicly, and the thing that I kind of looked around, I'm like, well, why isn't anybody talking about this? Like, why aren't pastors talking about this? That should be your wake up call, because the wake up call wasn't the fact they said it; it was the fact that nobody cared. A lot of people even made jokes like, "Hey, the government admitted that aliens are real. Nobody in 2017 was so crazy with Trump that nobody seemed to care." And I'm like, "No, the reason nobody cares is because they already believe it. That's the real problem. We're being sized up. We are being trained to believe this stuff is not just real because it is real, but that it is a certain thing. That's my problem. It's one thing to say that UFOs are real. It's another thing to say that aliens are real. And the problem is that's your hook. We're being boiled. We're like the frog. We're being boiled slowly over time to accept these things as normal, so that when the final shoe drops, everyone's already going to be like, "Oh, well, that makes sense."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, we have a question for you. It
Hmm.
says, looks like it's kind of more of a statement from Balkan Creek out of the YouTube channel. It says that Ezekiel 1:1 through 1:13 gives a description of some of these creatures that came out of the UFO. Then it says, you guys kind of wrote it down in 13. It says, as for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright. And it points out that in the movie Predator, fire was in Predator, the fire went up and down of some creature as it came out of the water, and that was a pretty neat scene too. But right there, I mean, is that talking about these living creatures coming out of some burning coal fire? Is that could that be UFOs, aliens?
No, in fact, I'm really glad that they got brought up, because Ezekiel's wheel is always the thing that everyone shows is like, here's a UFO, and they love to go to some guy, I forget his name. I'm terrible with names. This is where I write everything down, which
What's
is
my
why I
name?
started writing books. Um,
What's your
but
name?
I'm sorry, you corrected. Can you hear me?
What's your name?
Oh, my name's Jason.
Okay, I'm just checking. Okay.
Yeah, no, but I know that only because I have it tattooed here,
Okay.
and I have to double check every once in a while.
Okay, you do it now. Don't show us.
Yeah. Um, where was? Oh yeah, Ezekiel's wheel. Everyone loves to talk about Ezekiel's wheel,
I
and
love
they
that
usually
wheel.
show you that picture of what looks like a spacecraft with propellers on it.
Ooh, yeah, I thought I had that somewhere, man. I'm tired. I don't have it queued up right now.
Oh, don't even worry about it. The thing is, to get at that concept, you have to completely change what the scripture's actually saying, right? If you assume Ezekiel is describing accurately what he saw, then take a good look and actually translate what he saw. He's not talking about propellers. He has these wheels off to the side. There is clearly not a UFO. What you have are creatures that are on four corners. These are cherubs. Mm-hmm. Anyone who's done any real look and study of the ancient Near East will tell you they're cherubs. Cherubs are not a strictly biblical concept. In fact, a lot of those Near East cultures all had the same creatures, right? They had cherubs. They had God's throne. They had the same concepts. In fact, Babylonian astrology and Hebraic astronomy are the same thing. They are identical in every way, except they just switch the names. Mm-hmm. It's all coming out of the same milieu, and everyone sort of knows the same thing. That's another one. Here's the problem. The way it's actually described, those creatures are leaving this throne. Again, God's sitting on the throne. He's the Ancient of Days. He's clearly visible on a platform. Those wheels are wheels. The wheels aren't what's moving. It's the beasts. Everyone's like, "Oh, the beasts are these, landing gear." It's like, no, the beasts talk, they move, and the thing is, we see the same thing in Isaiah, the exact same thing in Isaiah, and those creatures actually depart and touch those same coals to Isaiah's lips to clear him. What we have in a lot of these cases is very strange things going on, and they do look weird, but then we have people who are coming along and deliberately misinterpreting what's happening. They're trying to program us to think, oh, that's what a UFO is. No, there's reasons to believe that UFOs should exist from biblical literature. Go to to the stories of Elijah when he's talking to Elisha, his compatriot. Elisha's freaking out because people are coming to kill him, and Elijah prays. And Elisha's eyes are open. He talks about seeing all these angels suddenly, and that they have chariots. Those are vehicles. But the thing is, he was able to instantly see them. It wasn't that anything around him had changed; his perception changed, and so he was able to see something. And he saw creatures, which were angels, in chariots. And the thing is, we have this very Greek-centric Western concept of what an angel looks like and what an angel is, and we assume that the things that happen in visions, where they're flying and they're being teleported from point A to point B, that's what angels can do naturally. But that's again all occurring in visions that's being given to somebody. That's like the equivalent would be like taking somebody, putting a VR helmet on them, and then showing them a bunch of images and letting them fly. It's like they're being shown things that's not what's actually happening to them, and it's not what's happening to the angels. When Jacob Jacob lays down at and sees the ladder, right? We call it Jacob's ladder. What is he saying? He's saying that he sees something that angels are ascending and descending on. They don't have the ability to just float down or appear. There's a way that they have to come and go. And so we've got a lot of assumptions as to what angels can do without actually stopping to say, well, what do they actually do? Scripture says we're made just a little lower than angels. It's not unreasonable to believe that angels need conveyances. They have weapons. We know that. That they're tool users. Maybe they, again, at least certain classes of angels do need these things. They need basically their equivalent of a car. And why is it so hard to believe that we'd see them from time to time? They interact with us. They're all throughout Scripture, appearing as normal humans to everybody, but they do supernatural things later on.
Jason, I'm looking forward to a time when I look outside my door and I see angels ascending and descending. Now, that may have been a singular act then, but it never said it never happened again. Has anybody reported that? Do you think that is actually still going on? Why would they stop ascend and descend? Well, it seems to me they're probably still doing it, but our perception's been altered. Our pineal gland's been done away with. Medication and drugs and GMOs have subdued us and medicated us. Maybe if we cleansed ourselves from the world, we'd be able to see those sights.
Well, I think the thing is we do see them a lot. I think we do, and we are. But I think again, it was weird for people in the Bible to see it. I mean, then when Jacob sees Jacob's ladder, it's in a dream, right? And he's surprised to see it. Anytime the angels show up, people are freaking out. Every time an angel shows up, it's like, hey, calm down. Don't be afraid. I'm fine. It's all good. God sent me. So I think that even for the people back then, it was weird to see an angel. But the thing is, as things have grown, as things have gotten bigger, we're starting to see them, and we're able to record them more accurately. We're able to let people know these things are occurring. And to sort of jump back to what y'all were talking about maybe earlier in the show with those crazy women who are saying, oh, you have to start killing children. We can't have children anymore. I think those people have always been around. The problem is they couldn't tell anybody that they were around. You know, they didn't have YouTube to go out there and say, hey, we're a bunch of crazy people. Talk to us. You know, but we're able to see that now. We have the ability to communicate it. So I think these things are still absolutely happening around us.
I don't know if you can see this, but I want to play this again. I just got to play. So I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'm going to play it for the folks. Here we go.
Humans on the planet. We don't need any more humans. It is not okay for women to have babies and stop contributing to the process.
Are you watching? Can you see that or not?
Yes,
children.
I can see that.
If you find yourself pregnant,
if I get stained with it, you got to get stained with it.
And you can have an abortion.
That's a special kind of stupid right there.
Off the baby factories
I thought she was trying to have an armpit orgasm. I may be the only one thinking that, but I mean, look at that face.
You don't need children.
That is the craziest thing. Like even the woman on the right, what is she doing? I mean, like this is a load of crazy that's unique. Like that takes a lot of crazy to do this. Like, are they trying to channel angels or something? Is that what they're claiming?
Well, yeah. They're trying to channel angels while they're telling everybody to kill babies. I mean, it's like, are you kidding me, man? I mean, you know, now here, notice the title, the Angelic Initiative. These people are saying they're channeling angels, and the angels are telling them to kill kids.
Well, here's the thing: they're not wrong. They're not wrong. And let's get back to the concept of how bad teaching in the church has gotten, right? And a lot of this is because of what we've been handed historically. Angels, and the name or the word angels, it just means messenger. Right?
Right.
We use it now, but we use it for all supernatural creatures that was directly created by God. So yeah, I think they are talking to angels. They're just talking to angels that fell. They're talking to the fallen angels, the ones who followed Satan, the ones who followed Satan. And there's so much that we've missed because we've rejected. Over the last 2,000 years, the Western world has sort of had, Christianity evolve within it and develop it so much that which is why we've advanced, right? So much of Western culture.
Some of us have advanced by looking at that video, Jason. I'm not sure everybody's advancing.
Well, unfortunately, 20%, 80% of the work is only done by 20% of the people.
Yeah,
and that's true of everything. I think society, probably works that way as well. But the thing is, we lost a lot of what the Near East had. Right, a lot of their understandings. So when it comes to certain questions of the Bible, we don't even understand that there's different hierarchies of angels. Each hierarchy having its own role, its own authority, its own powers, and that this is all preordained by God. He has that set up. There are spirits over the nations, and those are teachings that are just now starting to come back into the church, saying, "Hey, this is stuff that we've lost, and we need to get into it to understand what these people are talking to. They're not just. Don't get me wrong; those two were crazy." Legitimate outhouse rat crazy.
Rat crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just look at their faces. That's nuts. But here's the thing: are they talking to angels? Absolutely, they are. That's not antithetical.
I'm just glad that woman shaved because it'd be even nastier if she didn't.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying.
I was thinking the same thing.
But I think is the one on the right the leader?
I mean, look at these are not people who are connected to the real world. But they are connected to a world that is maybe more real than ours. That's the problem. And that's going to be the real issue. Because the church isn't standing up and saying, hey, here's what's right, here's what's wrong, here's the supernatural. And let's actually explain it from the Bible so you understand what's happening. People are going to fall into crap like this. And I can't imagine too many people following this per se. But the next one's going to be far less crazy. Yeah.
I mean, the look. Right? There's the eyes. There's in the eyes. There's nothing there. It's gone. I mean, there's nothing. Yeah. There's nothing behind. There's nothing behind that. It's empty.
Yeah.
And it looked to me like the one on the right is the controller, and telling this young girl who knows what kind of thing they got going on. But
someone needs to get in there with a good psychologist. That's for sure. But at the same time, we do ourselves a disservice, and really we do the lesser initiated a disservice by chalking everything up to crazy. Don't get me wrong, they're crazy.
Right.
But there's something bigger behind that crazy that
yeah.
we need to be fighting, and that we're not. The church is actively not fighting this crazy.
Well, now let me tell you something, though, Jason. I 100% agree with you because I mean, look, it's easy and fun to talk about AOC. You know, she says, hey, bread goes in a toaster, toast comes out, but where does the bread go? You know, or yes, we can land on the sun. We just have to do it at night. Simple. You know, how are we going to pay for the Green Deal? Hey, just pay for it. But that is crazy in a certain way. But in another way, look out, people. This woman is going to be controlling your life in the near future. Trump's not going to last forever, and certainly there's no Republicans got a spine or backbone or a set of balls. You know, and so this woman and her ilk and a whole generation of college educated or uneducated, however you look at it, are going to come into power, going to come into office, and there's a whole horde of people. So it's not just crazy; it's dangerous.
Oh, it's absolutely dangerous. And the real problem isn't the lone crazy people like AOC or any number of them. It's the uneducated Christian. It's the uneducated American who seems normal every other day of the week. But they have so little understanding. We've dropped basic thinking from education, and the thing is, they should be getting it from church at the very least, because this country was founded on Christians who didn't want to be ignorant. That's the thing we forget. When the Protestants first came here, they built colleges. When you graduated high school, you had to be able to speak Latin. When you graduate, and usually Greek. When you graduated from college, you had to be able to read Greek and Hebrew. When you got your doctorate, when you graduated from college as a doctor, the commencement was given in Hebrew. They expected biblical Hebrew. They expected you to know Latin, Greek, outside of the English that you were already speaking, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, so you could read the original scriptures as they existed, so that nobody else could tell you, because they firmly believe that the crimes of the Middle Ages that the Catholic Church committed was entirely due to the fact that people could not read the Bible for themselves. And they didn't want that to happen again. So that's why they came here. They founded this country in order to bring wisdom back. And what we've had for the last century are a bunch of Christians who may be well-meaning and a few good intellectual thinkers, but who have really done a poor job of promoting wisdom in the church, right? Same thing with America. We've embraced the concept that wisdom and intelligence are not necessarily manly, right? That you can't be wise and dignified and dangerous at the same time. And it was interesting. I was listening to Jordan Peterson the other day, and they were talking about how the differences between men and women. Of course, he's fighting with some harebrained feminist. And the video switched over to some conversations that were going on with some other psychologists as far as what they had learned by studying children for 30 years. And they noticed that the boys, when they would fight, not only did they behave better in general, they became better friends, but they would also be less dangerous. The children who were raised not fighting were actually more dangerous than the children who grew up fighting. And the reason for it is they understood how far was too far. They understood what they could and could not do. And it got me really thinking. The most civilized societies that Western or Eastern culture has ever produced, they were advanced, they were genteel, all of it. Every one of those cultures involved and included the teaching of warfare to those same educated people. They carried swords on their sides. You were trained to be wise, intelligent, you could read and write numerous languages, and you were dangerous. You were expected to be dangerous. And it's because one does not necessarily negate the other. You can be wise, kind, compassionate, and very, very dangerous. We've rejected all of that. We've said to be dangerous, you have to be crazy, you can't be wise. We said to be wise, you can't be dangerous. And it depletes us as a whole. The Grecian ideal of an idealized man is to be someone who is smart and resourceful and dangerous. And we've rejected all that.
You know, you just reminded me when you were talking about sort of manning up as a kid and doing things, getting into fights is almost a rite of passage. This is a personal story, so let me just share it with you.
Hey, it's your show. Take your time.
If any of my grade school buddies are watching, you might know who I'm talking about. All right, so anyway, I walk home from school. It might be the time I turned into a cowboy, because I wasn't always a cowboy, see. So I'm walking home from school, and this guy named Frankie, skinny kid. He said he'd run behind me as I'm walking home. Hey, you want to fight? You want to fight? I'm scared like hell because behind him was like a controller, this big dude, like 300 pounds with scars. I'm thinking, what is that guy doing in grade school, man? I mean, he should be in a facility, or he escaped out of lockout, but he was going to the same grade school, man. So he was like the protector, and so that gave this little kid the gonads, come at people because he got this guy. So one day, this little kid, he's following me from home from school like he always does. Said, hey, you want to fight? Well, he forgot to bring his buddy. His buddy wasn't there. So I turned around and said, yeah, bam, I cold cocked that SOB. And I believe that's the day that I turned into a cowboy. Mm-hmm. So there you go. That's a personal story.
Actually, I have a very similar story.
Oh, let's hear it.
But you're right. It's like these skinny kids there's a proxy, right? They're always a proxy for some bigger guy who's like, why aren't you the one fighting me? In fact, I got into it with this kid. I was in middle school, and he was significantly larger than I was. And he's like, fine, I'll beat you after school. Okay, fine. He was being a jerk. I'll go toe to toe with you. We meet in the bathroom, and he sends this taller, skinny kid. I'm like, why aren't you fighting me? He's like, because you're not worth my time. Okay, fine. Why do I have him? Mm-hmm. He's like, if I'm not worth your time, don't even bother to show up. Anyway, this kid comes on and attacks me. I mean, literally, I'm like, and he gets right up in my face. I'm like, hit me. I'm like, I'm not gonna throw the first punch here. You want to do this? You want to be the jerk? Bring it on. So I wait for him to. I wait for this scrawny child to punch me as hard as he could. I looked at him like, that better not be the best thing you got. Mm-hmm. But it's like that right there tells you everything you need to know. Mm-hmm. They're going to send someone weaker than them to fight because they don't want to do the dirty work themselves. They are mm-hmm. afraid mm-hmm. to do the dirty work themselves. Mm-hmm. Just like, really, again, supernaturally speaking, there's a metaphor here. Satan doesn't do the work himself. Mm. He sends whatever he can send after you. And this actually comes back to the book and sort of the whole concept of Christianity having a worldview that explains everything. In fact, if you go to sirupapers.com, SIRU papers.com, it's the group that's the group I run, the Society for the Investigation and Research of the Unexplained. Mm-hmm. It is a Christian group. Well, that's what we are. Membership is free. I finally got the membership forms up. You just have to send me an email. It's free. We'll keep you apprised whenever a new paper is written. There's a paper there on how the Christian worldview, or what it is. Like, what is the basic Christian worldview of the world? And how does that apply supernaturally? Well, it makes predictions as what you should and should not be seeing. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the first paper's on. But the thing is, when you really get into how Satan operates, he never comes at you directly. He comes at you through these proxies, through children, through who've been abused, women who've been abused. Wow. And maybe they'll send a demon after you. But what's a demon? An actual demon isn't a fallen angel. It's the spirit of a dead Nephilim. And we're told in the book of Enoch that God punished the spirits of Nephilim because they weren't supposed to exist. He sends them to he punishes the Nephilim, who were cannibals, to wander the earth as disembodied spirits. That's a demon. That's what possesses people. Haven't you ever wondered why an angel that's supposed to be so much more powerful than we are is running around possessing a human being and tormenting them? Mm. And why you'd have more than one angel crammed into a tiny little human? Mm-hmm. It's because they're not angels. They're the spirits of these Nephilim. Mm-hmm. They are evil spirits. They can't affect the world around them. Most of them are driven insane by the lack of tactile sensation. So they attack humans and they possess them. Well, that's usually who Satan loves to use, the people these creatures that are the most deprived and the weakest. Because if you may not be, most people, it needs to be subtle, right? A demon, or a demonic entity, an actual fallen angel stands before you, you're going to freak out and run to God. C.S. Lewis in Screwtape Letters, if you haven't read that, I do recommend reading that. Talks about how you can demons should make someone either a materialist or a witch. And he talks about how with the materialists, you don't have to worry about them worrying about God, right? Because they're always thinking about the material world. But if they're a witch, you can torment them directly. However, at some point, their mind will turn to God, and you can lose them. So the thing is, they send these lower demons after you because they're subtle, they're immaterial.
Wow.
And so they can get into you, they can torment you a little bit without being anything too obvious. It's very, very subtle. But I think the problem that the church is going to face over the next 10 to 15 years, maybe 20, is that C.S. Lewis had the thought of what he called the materialist witch in Screwtape Letters, which is that the demons could make you believe in something supernatural without believing in something supernatural. Mm-hmm. That you would believe in a material creature, so there's still a material world, but it had all the abilities of a demon or of a supernatural creature. And that's where we are with UFOs particularly. They are creatures who break all known laws of physics. They are telepathic, and yet we fully believe that all their these special powers is simply due to technology that they have that's so advanced that we just don't understand it. And they're just so advanced as a species that they can communicate with us telepathically. And so they're not angels. It's not magic. It's mm-hmm. simply technology that you're not advanced enough to understand. Mm-hmm. And so you get the best of both worlds. They can torment people directly. Talk to any UFO abductee. These are terrifying and usually very painful experiences. There's a girl, I believe her name is Nicole. I may be wrong on that. But she's put her experiences up on YouTube, and she's talking about how they were, she'll talk about how painful these surgeries were, and they were, drilling marrow out of her bones. But wow. That it was for her benefit. It was wonderful. And it was for the benefit of these hybrid children that they were creating, and everything was wonderful, and it was beautiful. And I'm like, have you ever heard of Stockholm Syndrome, lady? This is insane. You're telling me that your tormentors are your friends, but she absolutely believes it. And you can go to any of these UFO conventions, you'll find dozens of people who will tell you the same thing.
Mm-hmm. One of the good things, I've mentioned this in another broadcast, talking about aliens, and particularly the Gen 6 conference that we went to mm-hmm. last year. One of the speakers was a secular ufologist, well nationally known, and he goes to these conferences and sees the type of people you just described, the ones that, mm-hmm. with the Stockholm Syndrome or, beady eyes, they're like very, very nervous or, everybody's name, And so he said it was so refreshing to speak to a massive audience that didn't have these segments and groups of people, man, coming in with tinfoil hats and, flashlights flashing, the aliens come down and, having, mm-hmm. Orgon shooting, you ready for their Orgon blaster mm-hmm. to shoot an alien, which is what you get when you go to a secular, godless UFO conference. So finally, it's moving into the Christian realm where we can talk about these things. We have to talk about, we're supposed to have the answers, man. I remember a woman was said that her house was haunted. And so she went to a local a couple local churches and then went to a priest, and they all told her she needed help, but she needed her house. She needed the demon out of her house. And so they said, well, you need drugs instead. Now this is mm-hmm. not to say that she was crazy. What I'm saying is she went to church for answers, and they said, well, I can't help you with exorcism or clean your house or demon possession, but we can help you with learning the life of Paul this week. Yes. We can teach you how Paul, was struck on his horse. We can teach you that. We can teach you how, various things like, well, wait a minute, man, I got a life here. Things going on. I can't get to the life of Paul. I'm not mocking the life of Paul. But what I'm saying is that's not what you need to be talking about. You need to have a lot of things in your quiver. You need to be ready to fight spiritual battles when they come or when you're asked to fight them, because we're supposed to be spiritual warriors, spiritual people in a carnal body. But some people don't like that.
Well, exactly. And like I said, it's because we have rejected as a church the supernatural. We just have. And my personal thought is, if you've rejected supernatural, then you've rejected God himself. He is a spiritual being. He is a celestial being. You can't reject one and not reject the other. Again, what does Jesus tell us? To love God is to love your neighbor as yourself. You can't separate one from the other. You can't hate your neighbor and love God. You can't love God and hate your neighbor. In the same way, you can't reject the supernatural and embrace the supernatural God. Mm-hmm. You simply can't do it. These can't be separated. They're the same. If we have a supernatural God, then we live in a supernatural world, and we need to address the world in the way it's going. It's in many ways, so it's very similar to the policies of these liberals, right? Mm-hmm. They want to have all these touchy-feely things, and no culture is bad, and we don't want to have oil, and it's like the problem is all of these ideas may be pretty, but they are separate from reality.
Right.
You have to face the enemy on the terms the enemy understands.
You mean we can't take a train to Hawaii?
No, you cannot take a train to Hawaii.
Oh, crap.
Well, you can probably once, but at some point that train's not going to work very well. The better example, probably an easier example, would be creating, and this goes back to even the concept of the worldview of the Christian. Our Christian worldviews are wrong on a lot of this material, right? Imagine you were going to build an aircraft, but you rejected physics. You rejected things. You didn't study how aerodynamics work. You didn't study how gravity works. You didn't study what people have built before. And so you decide, I'm going to go build this giant box and it's going to fly. No, you wouldn't do that because you've rejected reality. It's not like people haven't been trying to fly for 1,000 years. It was like everyone's like, oh, well, we can't possibly fly until the Wright brothers. People had been trying to fly for 1,000 years. What did the Wright brothers do? They figured out how to test and see how the world actually worked. They said, well, this is how air actually works. Let's use it. In the same way, you can't reject God's teachings on all of these things and then be useful when the time comes. You have to be able to address the world as it is. And the problem is the church is not doing that, and it's made Christian, like you said, the Christian warriors non-existent. I had a friend that had been plagued by shadow men for years, since he was a child. He had been sexually abused as a child, which is, by the way, that is a very common theme, and a lot of people that I've run across, people who've been, who are abductees and have been tormented by shadow people or other form of demonic entities. Sexual abuse is very common, and he grew up in the church. He was nominally Christian, but every once in a while he'd run across a pastor. He's like, "Hey, I'm seeing these things at night. I try to go to sleep. I wake up. I'm paralyzed, and they're there. Sometimes I wake up and I can move, and they're there. I saw them over my kid's crib. What do I do?" And the pastor says, "Well, let's talk to some psychologists and get you drugs, like you said." Right. And again, this is his personal experience. And so he stopped talking to Christians. He stopped talking to pastors about this until me. I don't know how it came up. I forget how it came up in conversation. Usually I'm a little weird. My conversations are wide ranging. But we started talking, and I'm like, well, hey, why don't you do this? And I have a step for most of this. I'm like, see how that works. And he's like, it changed. Why? I'm like, well, you got yourself right with God, right? He goes, yeah. I said, you prayed the prayers I told you to pray, right? He goes, yeah. You got rid of all the things I told you to get rid of, right? He goes, yeah. I'm like, well, then it's because you were dealing with demons. Demons can't be where God is. That's all you have to do is get closer to God. Again, all these Christians who are abducted, they're not Christians. They're people who attend the church once or twice a year.
Wow. Wow.
Again, you're a cowboy. You can appreciate this. My mother always told me, I'm a fifth generation Texan. You can put your boots in the oven, but don't make them biscuits. Sitting in a hen house doesn't make you a chicken.
Right
Sitting in a church doesn't make you a Christian.
Right on. Wow. Hey, by the way, I haven't said this. I got to tell the folks, I've been occasionally putting up in the background there these types of drawings. These are your drawings, by the way, everybody.
Yes,
and so if you ever feel like commenting on anything I put up there, but yeah, so you're an artist.
I try to be. That's Stevie Ray Vaughan, by the way.
Yeah.
Again, Texan. I had to do it. So yeah, I have a couple of websites up. One is jarofpaint.com, and that's my personal website. You can go there directly. You can order, pen and ink artwork. I do a lot of comics. I'm actually working on a project right now for Christian comics that you can share for free. And basically it's like the old Chick tracts, right? Except now it's digital. And so along the way, I've done some comics. I've done some work. I've done some commissions like this. That's Godzilla versus one of the Jaegers from Pacific Rim. Yeah, thank you. And like I said, I do biblical scenes. I do some stuff. And in Siru, like I said, we're free. Membership's free at Siru. Everything I want to put everything out there for free because I believe it's a resource, not just for Christians, but for non-Christians as well. I want to help people. There are people out there who are being tormented by these things, and the church is not helping them. So I want to teach them how to help them and how to help themselves, and get pastors to read some of my books and say, hey, I need to be out there in the world helping people. That's my job. It's not just, like you said, to teach people the life of Paul. That's a good thing. learn Paul's life. That's a great thing. You should learn all these things, but you should also be able to do this. Like I said, there is no, the unexplained supernatural phenomena of the Old Testament. Why God sent his judgment as fiercely as he did in the Old Testament. These are things that people condemn God all the time for. And there's nothing the atheists love more than to sit there and talk about how genocidal God is. Well, if you can't answer that, then you're allowing God to be slandered. He wasn't genocidal. He's akin to a doctor, operating and removing a gangrenous limb. And in the supernatural, the paranormal, the sciences that the mainstream world wants to reject is the evidence of everything the Bible says. So yeah, you can go to serupapers.com. You can read. I only have one paper up, but there's more coming. Believe me, there's more coming. But you can buy any of my books through the links there, and you can also, again, you can go to our merchandise store. I have some T-shirts. We're having posters put up a little bit later. Actually, I got some drawings of some stuff that's coming. There'll be both articles and stuff like this. The Buru, it's basically just a giant megalania.
Bring it back up. I'll get you close up.
I can't see if you can see it here.
There you go.
There you go. Anyway.
Wow. I met that guy one time.
Doesn't take, the Loveland Frogman. This is all stuff that's coming.
That's a reptoid right there, ain't it?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, he's going to be the subject of probably not the next paper that's coming, but the paper after that. Let's move on to cryptozoology, because ufology is easy to beat down on, right? Really easy. And there's another segment coming in Seru probably in like a month that I think people are going to really enjoy on that. If you like watching the Ancient Aliens show, you'll enjoy what's coming in about a month. Like I said, we have more papers coming. But to the cryptozoology side, which is really what got me into it. I'm a cryptozoologist at heart, right? And I think what really got me into it, although I didn't really personally, I had to internalize this information myself. When I was 12, I saw a pterodactyl, a living ramfractoid pterodactyl. And again, I didn't believe it for 20 years. But actually, one of my first books on cryptozoology is The Wyvern. And it basically, I didn't realize until after I'd written it that was the creature I had seen. I mean, I knew what it was that I'd seen, but
you realize, Jason, that you just said you saw a pterodactyl.
Oh, believe me, no one thinks it's crazier than I do, because that was actually the problem, right? Is I was a creationist at the time. I believe that Mokele and Mbembe and the Loch Ness Monster were living dinosaurs, though I'm iffy on the Loch Ness Monster now, but that's a different kettle of fish. But for me, to be living just south of Dallas, Texas, to see a living ramfractoid pterodactyl, I thought was crazy. I was 12 at the time, very well acquainted with the stuff out there, because that's what we did. We fished. I was actually fishing in a creek with a friend. We were packing up to head inside. I hear this noise. It's the call of some animal, I can tell, but it's like I've never heard anything like it. So I stopped by, peeked my head out from the tree line, because the trees they hug the creeks around here. And I turn and I see it. And at first I think it's the biggest blue heron I've ever seen in my life. I think it's 8 to 50. The wingspan's 8 to 10 feet. I'm like, this is the biggest blue heron ever. And then it's flying eye level. It gets 5 feet from my face, and it's only then that I realize, broad daylight, there's no feathers on this thing. And what I thought had been the legs, because when a heron flies or crane flies, it sticks its legs straight out behind it. That's what I thought I was seeing. It wasn't until it actually passed that I realized they're not legs. It's a tail with a flange on the end.
Whoa!
And as it flies by, like I said, it's 5 feet from the wingtip is 5 feet from my face. I got a real good look at this thing, and I'm watching it even as it passes even more. And I'm like, that can't be what I saw. And my friend even shows up right after it left, and I'm like, did you see the pterodactyl? He's like, you're insane. They've been dead for millions of years. And I'm like, no one's gonna believe me. And so I just sort of filed it away in my subconscious. It wasn't until I was talking to some other cryptozoologists about something I can't really talk about yet. But I was telling them my stories, and they were telling the stories for a show they were working on, and they point out that this exact type of creature was seen as far north as Oklahoma. And they were talking to a lot of people like, hey, by the way, here's the drawing you gave us. Here's the model this guy made. I'd never spoken to the guy, and it's an exact replica. So the thing is, these accounts come out of the Rio Grande Valley all the time. There is no, the simple fact of the matter is people have seen these creatures for millennia, thousands of years. That's what the wyvern is. That's why I call it a wyvern. A wyvern is a specific type of dragon.
I think it's going to happen. Where'd you go? Boom! There you go.
There he is. Beautiful face. Beautiful.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. I think what it is the pterodactyl. We start talking about that. NSA didn't like it. Obviously, they are probably growing these things down there. Some underground base there. But you're talking about, let's get back to it because I want to talk about these things. And we were talking about earlier too, Jason, about the cryptoids. They're more prevalent now than they have ever been. And we need to have some answers, but that was your experience. And when you saw the pterodactyl, then you knew things are not as they seem.
Exactly. And the thing is, I was already a creationist. I already believed in them, but I knew I couldn't tell anybody. And it took nearly 20 years before I actually came to terms with all of that. Actually, a little more than 20 years to come to terms with all of that. And the thing is, what it shows, what it deeply ingrained in me is the reality that there's weirdness in our world. Our world does not conform to the worldview that the atheists want us to have. That's why a lot of these reports aren't cited. And the thing is, I think that a lot of these things were more common back in the past. This is where we get unicorns. This is where we get dragons. This is where we get a lot of these things that we consider mythical creatures are simply animals that survived the flood unchanged. I think this is, and I think, let me bring this home because I know we're running out of time. Let me bring it all home to the nature of the book. If you have and again, y'all should all buy the book, obviously. In fact, you should buy 20 copies of the book and give them out to friends. But if you believe the Bible is accurate, and there's a broad spectrum of interpretations on this, right? But just in general, you have to believe that the world prior to the flood was much better than it was today. That means the animals are going to be healthier. It would have been more diverse. That all the animals that breathe the air and that survived on the ark, which means every animal that's still alive today is a descendant of something that crawled on the ark. Which means we're going to be less diverse than we were prior to the flood. Most of those animals are going to change. In fact, this is one of the things I think that the church really missed the boat on, was rejecting Darwin out of hand. Darwin's observations were correct. You have all these animals. You have maybe 1,000 species at best get off the ark. They spread as their descendants adapt to the new environment. They're evolving into new species. It's the bloodline that matters. You have you take one pair of sheep, all of a sudden you can get all the different sheep and goat on the world. They're adapting to a new environment. But some of those creatures don't change. They don't adapt. And so they seem very, very strange to us. That would be your mythical creatures. And again, because they don't adapt as well, they're not as common. Any biologist will tell you, if you want to go out, people who study wolverines for as a living, the actual little critter wolverine, not Hugh Jackman, but it's like these are people who will go out there and study wolverines. They can go out and not find them. They know where they live. They know all their habitats. They know their food, and they go out looking for them. They won't find them. Well, if you have an animal that's maybe down to 1,000, it's maybe count maybe 1,000 animals or 100 animals, and they have survived by avoiding humans, how often do you think we're going to see them? But then you go back 100 years, people used to write accounts of them. You say, hey, we saw this thing. And they were taken seriously. But you get into the post-World War I, the Darwinists rule academia. They're trying to actively disprove the Bible. In fact, that's one of those things that no one talks about in the geologist world. Is there was a letter written in the 1700s to this big geological community in academia, and they said, look, we need to disprove the flood. That was actually what they said. It was said in French, but we have to disprove the flood. So we need to find a way to explain all of the erratics. An erratic is a large boulder that's smooth, like a river rock, but it's just in the middle of a field somewhere, right? In England is littered with them. But all these things that are usually used to prove that the flood is real, we have to find a way to prove or to explain it without giving credibility to the Bible. That is literally what they wrote in French back in the 1700s. And so the idea of the Ice Age was created because you can get much of the same phenomena from an Ice Age as you would from, say, water, a cataclysmic flood. So we've had a very deliberate attempt by atheists to undercut the Bible every chance they got. And the problem is cryptids are what are traditionally known as cryptids are simply examples, living, breathing examples and evidence that the flood occurred. If dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, I shouldn't have seen one in Texas. If dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, Mokele and Mbembe shouldn't exist. On and on it goes, on and on. And the problem is that cryptozoology has been shunned by the broader world because it undermines their worldview, and the Bible predicts them. We should see them. And the problem is that Christians aren't going out there and doing the work to get these things proven. Mm-hmm. If you can prove Bigfoot exists, it's over. If you can prove Mokele and Mbembe exists, a lot of this is over. Mm-hmm. Now, let's go back to Bigfoot. What is Bigfoot? I don't know. The two prevailing theories are it's some sort of remnant ape, which I'd love. It'd make my life easier if it's just some giant ape that, like Gigantopithecus. Yeah. But then you have the hybrid theory. If it's a hybrid, then it's something far more bizarre and makes people really uncomfortable. That's why Melba Ketchum, her work has been largely rejected, even by cryptozoologists. They don't like the idea that they're human plus, right? But if you read the Bible, you believe the Bible, and you have to know that there's creatures out there that are human plus. There are creatures out there that angels went a little far on that second date. And they're Nephilim children running around, and they're not quite human. And if you really get into the text, you know what some of the legends are. Those Nephilim did some other weird stuff. There's more than just human-looking Nephilim like Og, King of Bashan, or Goliath, or any of these others. There's other creatures running around out there potentially that look less human. And I've spoken with, I won't give his name because I don't believe he allowed for, or that he said that his name should be attached to it, so I won't. But there's a leading young Earth creationist who will tell you that he believes that this book of Job references Bigfoot. When it talks about the sons of fools in the book of Job, the way it's described is that they bray like donkeys. They live in dry riverbeds, and they dig up tubers and things like that to eat. Wow. And he calls them the sons of fools. And this leading creationist would say, if you look at the literature on Bigfoot, I'll be the first one to tell you, they use riverbeds as navigation. They follow the creeks. It's not just the water. They use them as maps. They live in and around them. He goes, this is a perfect description of a Bigfoot. And we know that people have talked about these, the similar creatures both in Europe. I would argue that the story of Grendel in Beowulf, that's a Bigfoot. We have hairy hominids being described all over the place in the old world. Well, they're not just here in the U.S. So, these things exist. The Bible accounts for them, and it creates a worldview that allows you to explain them. And I think this is why Satan has worked so hard to get the church to ignore this. Mm-hmm. It gives us an understanding of what they are so they can be combated. Like I said, we don't have to combat pterodactyls. We don't have to combat Bigfoot per se, but the supernatural stuff we do. And cryptids is perfect evidence against atheism. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those things where this is something we need to be a part of, and a conversation we need to be having, not just for the souls of the people who are interested in them, but for the souls of people who aren't interested in them. Like I said, world-leading atheists love to talk about how evil God is in the Old Testament for destroying these things, for destroying the old world, for the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, for the cleansing of the Levant. We should be able to sit there and say, hey, crazy atheists who believe the universe blew up randomly for no reason back 12 billion years ago on a Tuesday. These things happen for a reason, and you should be thanking God they happened, because here's why. And here's why he did it, and you would have done it in his place as well.
Well, let me ask you something. With these creatures you're talking about now, it's interesting you said that Christians should be addressing it and looking at it, and I don't particularly want to make a commercial for Gen 6 Productions or Skywatch TV. I like everybody. I know I know all of them. Actually, I know all of them in both organizations. But Jason, these guys have been going around the world finding elongated skulls, remnants of giants, ancient civilizations. They've been doing the work that the secular folks have not been doing, and they've been coming up with some real stuff, man. It's heavy duty.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of their stuff is groundbreaking. They were the first to talk about transhumanism. And so there is a movement within the Christian community to get into some real science and archaeology and to prove, and not anything that they've discovered has disproven the Bible. It's just more proof that, as the Bible said, there were giants in the land. And going to that, most, well, in church, I don't want to say churchgoers, I don't want to personalize it, but they'll say that they understand the story of David and Goliath. And so in their mind, the simplicity of it, there's a giant running around somewhere, but they got to read the text because it said there were whole villages of giants,
Oh, absolutely.
So,
well, again, most people who even preach it will say, well, why does David grab 5 stones? Like, it says very specifically he took 5 stones from the river. Well, and people are like, well, maybe it's a metaphor for this or a metaphor for that. It's like, it's not a metaphor. Goliath had 4 other brothers. It says it explicitly in the text. And they were all giants. Mm-hmm. The text tells us. And so, like I said, it's evidence, and like you said, it's evidence that we aren't getting into the text to understand it properly. David went out there thinking, these other 4 guys are going to come after me, and I need people to take them out. That's why he grabbed the other stones. Mm-hmm. There's no metaphor there. It's literal. There were other giants. Og was, no matter how you calculate, there's an interesting little thing I ran across. There's a discrepancy between the Septuagint's account of Goliath's height and the Masoretic text. The Masoretic text is what most Bibles are translated from. They give the cubits as 2 different cubits. And the reason for this, I've come to believe, and it's a long story of how I get there, but we'll jump ahead, is that there are multiple cubits throughout history. It's not just 18 inches. Everyone teaches a cubit is 18 inches. No, there are multiple types of cubits. And I think that the change was to standardize the cubit. So I'll put Goliath at just over 9.5 feet tall, which makes him far taller than anyone else recorded. But the thing is, you get to Og, even if you use the smallest cubit, he's in the teens. The shortest he could be is 13. He's probably over 18 feet tall. These things were massive. These weren't just tall NBA players. These creatures were massive, and they were terrifying. We see most people who are very tall today, that's due to some genetic mutation or a disease. These people weren't just elongated. They were proportioned. They were massive. And Gen 6 Productions has done amazing work. And, the people from Skywatch, L.A. Marzulli, you can go down, Steve Quayle, Steve Horn, you can go down the list. There are Christians out there doing this and making a huge impact. And because, again, it does have a lot of prophetic impact as well. But at the same time, there aren't enough. Right. Just a handful of people, like we spend the next 10 minutes to name every single Christian who's into this and dealing with it on a public level, and we'd be done. There should be hundreds of thousands of Christians into this, going out there, gathering evidence, making these arguments to their peers, but there aren't. Because the broader church has forgotten it. Because, like you said, it's easy to preach that God wants you healthy, wealthy, and wise. That God wants you to pray the prayer of Jabez. That that's all that God wants out of you. He wants to show up in church in a pew on a Sunday and then forget He exists the rest of the week. That's the church that we've come into. That's the church that says, well, we have the professional preacher up there, and your job is to sit there and listen to him.
We've got a question from actually one of our upcoming guests, Paul Shishi, on a YouTube chat. Says, do you know anything about flying snake-like creatures?
There are certain topics that bother me profoundly, and mermaids are one, and this one's the other one. And here's why. I have come across many of them. And wow. The thing is, some of it I can attribute to just artwork that has been translated. I think in fact, there's a stone I'm trying to get an etching of. It's a round stone, but it's clearly what I saw, right? It was the way it's described very artistically. However, then you have these snake with wings, and those accounts, you can see them in medieval bestiaries, which were basically like encyclopedias of animals back in the Middle Ages. 500 years ago, people would paint them out and they would draw them out, and they would do the best they could with them. So you see them there. You see them in bestiaries or drawings in South America, in all over Latin America. And there was an account I read of a kid. I want to say it's in the 60s. I may be wrong on that. But he was walking around South Texas, and he's walking with a friend of his. They're out hunting something, and he sees this, what he described as a snake with wings, flying fairly low. He catches it with his cap, said it had some sort of fur on it, and on the wings, but it was a snake. I think fur maybe, I don't think he described it as very long, thin stuff, so he said it was hair-like, probably not actually hair. but that it had wings like a bat, and that it was a snake. He even describes it as being very similar to, I believe, a copperhead. It's been a few years since I read the account, and I'll be honest, I don't know what to do with those. I think there are enough of those accounts that they are clearly a thing, but what that thing is, I don't know. Maybe there is a type of serpent that we're unfamiliar with, but again, then you have to go into other accounts where people see whole hordes of flying snakes, no wings, just snakes, just slithering in through the sky, and you're like, okay, there's something weird going on here. And I'm even willing to believe that a lot of what we call cryptids are supernatural creatures. I think the Mothman is clear, maybe supernatural. I think a lot of things people chalk up as cryptozoological are actually supernatural. I think there's some things that are chalked up to ufological. They're actually cryptozoological. So I think we have to do a lot of sorting for this. But when it comes to flying serpents, I'm aware of them. I just don't know what to do with them. And there doesn't seem to be enough consistency in their sightings for me to really make a determination.
So are you saying that these cryptids, the Dogman, Mothman, Shadow People? I mean, there's a whole host of them. Bigfoot, and various creeps. Are they interdimensional? Are they coming into the dimension? Or are they always here and they're materializing? Are they real, living in layers in the forest? Where are they at?
Well, it's sort of all of the above. It depends on which one you're talking about, right? Like I said, if you're talking about something like your pterodactyls, which would be your wyverns, your Mokelian bembes, all your other physical would seem to be just relic populations of animals. They're material creatures. They're just living in habitats that we're unfamiliar with, or in ways that we're unfamiliar with, and their numbers are so small we just rarely see them. So that would be your one level of those. When you get into Bigfoot, Dogmen, things like that, like I said, Bigfoot could be a relic ape. I would really hope that to be the case. Or you could have some that are relic apes and some that are hybrids. If they're hybrids, they may be interdimensional. They may be hiding because they would be a physical force for the supernatural. Let's just take a quick step, a little sidestep on this. Something like the Nephilim, right? Why would Satan want Nephilim to exist? Why do we have this hybridization program that's key and central to the abduction phenomena? Well, the simple fact of the matter is, demons can be cast out in the name of Jesus, and angels, even if they are fallen angels having much more power, they still have to obey the laws of God. They have to ask permission. Satan has to ask permission to sift us. But a physical creature that's half human or partly human or 2/3 human, that doesn't have to ask permission of anything. Some punk on the street with a 9mm doesn't have to ask God's permission to come break into my house and shoot me. Well, but a Nephilim has enough human agency. He doesn't have to do it either. Goliath didn't need permission to go before David, right? And so that's what a lot of these physical creatures are. And so I would argue that Bigfoot very potentially could have a forest living environment, but then from time to time maybe they do go someplace else. Maybe they are going, because there are tons of sightings of these things entering and leaving UFOs. There is a direct connection to Bigfoot and to orbs. A lot of cryptozoologists I know don't like that connection, but you can talk to there are many secular cryptozoologists and ufologists who will tell you that yes, they do absolutely have a connection to UFOs. What that connection is, no one knows. Well, I would argue if they're hybrids, here's your connection.
I heard an interview, a random interview on YouTube, and somebody was speculating that the reasons you sometimes find a single Bigfoot footprint is because that Bigfoot is stepping into another dimension or stepping into a portal. So you apparently have one footprint there in the middle of the forest. That was pretty interesting. Let me give you a question here from one of our chats here. It says, do you think the Dogman is here to fight the mountain giants? That's what there's an Indian woman that says it, I guess.
You know what? That's at this point, I don't like to speculate where I don't have a lot of information. I think that's something that and this is general advice for life. I mean, really. Like I said, I was archaeologically trained, and one of the things that we learned is we had this paper on how to describe a bottle, and it took a month to write a description of a bottle, and the reason for it is you can't assume things so the problem is with a lot of these cryptids, the contact is so sparse, the events are so few and far between, and everything's so broad. We don't really know what's happening. And many people who have their encounters, they're scared. It's an unknown creature they're looking at. They're not properly interpreting the event. So why these things are here at this point, we don't have enough information to know. The question becomes, who's creating them? If Dogman is a hybrid of some kind, the question becomes, who's creating it? Well, the only theory I would say is, God doesn't make hybrids. God specifically says not to make hybrids. That was one of the things he shows throughout Scripture. Things are supposed to be what they are. It's Satan who hybridizes things. So if he's hybridizing, Bigfoot, if he's hybridizing Dogman, then they have a demonic purpose.
Well, let me ask you something, Jason. When pre-flood Noah, it said that the earth had been corrupted, and many people speculate that was their DNA had been altered, all except for the family of Noah, and God destroyed them. Is it possible that we've returned to that alteration where, say, pre-flood, you had the centaurs and the beast of all kinds, flying cryptids, all sorts of creatures, alien hybrids running amok up on the planet? Then it kind of, after the flood, it kind of eliminated them all. But now we're kind of back, because it says, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man's comes. Have we returned to those pre-flood days?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's not even a question. It is, and if you want independent verification of this, actually the book series that you've been showing, Antichrist, the 2017 and Beyond series, deals with the very popular 2017 alignment from a few years back, right? Where it was like, oh, this is, the woman clothed with the sun. It's from Revelation 12. Well, most people completely misunderstood what that was about. I've, from 2014, said that it was the fulfillment of what John saw, but it was nothing about the rapture. It's a signpost. God's telling us things, and there's a hidden message within it as far as where the Antichrist will be coming from, what nations you need to look at, and that he's not entirely human. He will be a Nephilim. And that's all found within the alignment. You just have to understand how to read it, because God gave us it's a coded message. Well, again, if Jesus said this is what's going to look like at the end of times, Jesus has told us it's the end of times. He gave us an independent and obvious sign that it is the end of times. Brother, we're there, and that's what these things are. That's what we're seeing, and we're seeing them much. And here's the deal: it's not just that the angels created them. That's the thing. The days of Noah, the Nephilim had already been killed. That's the thing we forget. The actual Nephilim were gone. What was left were the creatures humans made. Look, and I'll be the first one to say the Book of Jasher is not the actual Book of Jasher that's found in the Scripture, right? It's referenced. The Book of Jasher that most people are reading now is not. It's a forgery. But what it is it is a collection of a lot of Jewish mythology. And there were two key things that were happening just prior to the flood is that people sort of skip over is oral abortifacients for women, so they didn't have to have children. Wow. And they had the humans were deliberately crossbreeding certain animals. And again, the way it's translated there is weird, but it's miscegenation, which means the crossbreeding of species to make something new. Those were the two things that were occurring, again, according to Jewish legend, just before the flood. And it wasn't that the angels were doing it. The angels taught them how to do it. It was what man was doing. And so my thing is, yeah, we have the alignment. We have a lot of things going on. But what do we have? We have oral abortifacients being given to women, right? It's not just, hey, here's birth controls. Let's murder your child with a pill. And then what do we have? We have humans creating human-animal hybrids. And it's not even that it's hidden anymore. We publicly admit this, that's what we're doing. And we're doing it so we can create animals to replace our body parts. Like you said, through transhumanism, right? Instead of waiting for a person to die so you can replace them with a heart, let's just grow a human pig and then kill the pig and take the organs and put in this person. That's what we're doing. These are all the signs that Jesus said we need to be watching out for. And again, it's not just the days of Noah, but Sodom and Gomorrah as well. And of course, we point to Sodom and Gomorrah as being a time of moral decay. But if you look at I make a connection in one of the books. I think the one about the Antichrist. The book of Jude is putting the Sodom and Gomorrah directly into connection with the angels that fell. I think that they knew those angels were angels. They weren't, oh, here's some random guys we need to rape. They saw them and recognized them for what they were, and that's why they wanted them. They wanted the genetics. They were trying to recreate the Nephilim, which is why God destroyed them entirely. He's like, no, we're not doing this again, and he wiped them out. We are trying to create hybrids. That's what the aliens are doing. We are creating hybrids ourselves through these just abominable genetic manipulations that we're doing, and we're trying to find more and easy ways to murder our own children. These are the end days.
Are you saying that when the angels were surrounded at Lot's house and they said, "Bring them out so that we may know them"? It's interesting. He said, "Hey, I got daughters, man. Take them." They didn't want the daughters. Okay, those guys wanted the males. But
they wanted the angels.
But are you saying it wasn't because they were just males? It's because they wanted the angels to create some sort of hybrid?
Absolutely. Here's the thing. Anytime in Scripture, if you look carefully, particularly when you talk about the cleansing of the Levant, there were two groups that were in the Levant when the Jews went in from Egypt. There were the tribes they could make peace with, and there were the tribes they had to completely destroy, including the animals. All of the tribes they had to destroy were Nephilim. Go to the pre-flood world. Why the pre-flood world had to be utterly wiped out? Because the Nephilim were there. Jude connects directly the angels that left their first state, the 200 watchers, to the men of Sodom and Gomorrah. Wow. God only ever is just no holds barred when there's Nephilim involved. Look at what happened with Nineveh. Nineveh, the Assyrians were some bad people, but he sends Jonah to redeem them. Now the redemption didn't last too long. They got bad real fast, but he still gave them an opportunity. Nebuchadnezzar was given a chance to repent and redeem himself. Pharaoh, God gave Pharaoh the opportunity. He could have kept the Hebrew slaves if he had just allowed the Hebrew to do what God had asked them to do. Whenever it's a human, God has grace, he has mercy. But whenever there's a Nephilim, that's when you get hellfire and brimstone and you destroy everything absolutely, totally, down to the animal. Because the Nephilim genetics are dangerous. So you just have to put two and two together. Jude says they're connected. That's your connection, is that they were trying to create these hybrids.
Wow. Hey, I think we got a comic book collector here, and I think I don't know if it's normal, but I think some comic book collectors collect lunchboxes as well. Do you have
yes.
Do you have a collection, and what's your favorite comics?
Let's see one. Man. I have 3 lunchboxes.
Let's see one.
They got given to me at different times. I actually used to own a comic book store a few years back before gas first peaked over $4 a gallon. That's what killed us.
No.
So yeah, I'm a huge fan of comics. I will say though, I have not purchased a new comic in a couple of years. And Marvel, I love the Marvel movies, but Marvel and DC have gone out of their way to say that they don't want me. I'm a white Christian male who, believes in the Bible, and they've gone out of their way to sort of say, yeah, we don't want you reading our books. So I obliged. I know where I'm not wanted, and so I'm not about to do it. I love Spider-Man though. He's Spider-Man's my favorite character. The thing, you go back to the old comics, they teach you because they were written by people who came out of who really believed in the Judeo-Christian mindset. Most of them were Jewish. Stan Lee's is Jewish. They created this, and they told the old stories, and they showed you that heroism was about giving of yourself. Right? It's that you have the responsibility to go out there and make the world a better place. And it wasn't about all the doom and gloom that we see in a lot of comics today. It wasn't about these people worrying. It's like, oh, so we're bad as me. Look how bad I have it. It was about saying, hey, you know what? The world is out there. You have a place in it. Go out there and take that world by storm. Get out there. Do the right thing because it's the right thing, no matter what it costs you. And that is a message that should resonate throughout everybody. But comics did it very, very well. And they told you that over and over and over. He's like, yeah, it may look bad. Spider-Man almost never came out personally, but you saw the people he saved. And that's when you realized, hey, that's what it's about, right? That life is about you making the world better for somebody else, not necessarily yourself.
Wait a minute, Jason. Did you just say that Spider-Man's coming out?
No. Spider-Man, in the comics when he would say, he'd end up saving somebody and the day was saved, but then he was always still broke.
Okay.
I'm saying, he never came out personally ahead of his.
Okay.
It's like, he was always broke, and the girlfriend would always run off with some other guy.
Yeah.
But he made the world a better place.
Yeah.
And that was even in the 60s, the original theme song they gave to those terribly animated cartoons. There's a line that says, "Action is his reward." It wasn't. It was, you understood. He wasn't going to be rewarded with fame or money or power. He was rewarded by the lives he saved. Right? It's that sort of heroism that we're missing in this country. Mm-hmm. Everyone's like, well, great, but what does it mean to me? How do I get ahead? How do I make money off of this? What power does it give me? Our politicians ask it. Our preachers ask it. Everybody asks it. No one says, what do I do to make the world a better place and not have it benefit? Even if it costs you everything you've got. That's it. I love comics. I love the visual medium. And but like I said, unfortunately, they've been taken over by too many SJWs who aren't willing to they want to tell me how terrible it is to be a white Christian.
Wow.
So
wow, man, you just described some really redeeming qualities you never even think about. These guys are always seeming to help, and they always seem to have a sort of a good conscience too. Paul Shishi asked this question too. He wants to know from you, Jason, do you think that the Earth is a farm for other intelligences? Like say a cattle farm, that we are the cattle.
Right. I've heard this. There's also the zoo theory, and the answer to that is no. And the reason being, again, biblical worldview. Right. Let me take a step back on that. When I was raised, I was raised Christian, but my father, who's a mechanic, told me I could believe anything I want. I could be a Buddhist, atheist, didn't matter, but I had to be able to prove it.
Wow.
And so what they did was that told me I need to go out there and I had to learn everything. I had to, study everything that I could. And at the end of it, I'm like, the reason I wrote this book, the Christian worldview is the only worldview that explains everything. The reason we have questions like this, like, is there a farm or, are there whatever, is that we don't have a working worldview that explains everything, right? And that's why ufologists they want to keep to themselves. The cryptozoologists want to keep to themselves. The Christians want to keep to themselves. They want to have a worldview that doesn't it sort of rejects the stuff that they don't like. And so they start creating theories to it's like, well, then why are aliens visiting us, and why is this? So, like I said, speaking from the unknown, right? So now you're having to create theories around theories around theories. I like to say, hey, let's take a look. Here's the biblical view. Here's the worldview. Here's what it predicts. Do we line up? Do these predictions make sense? Answer yes. We see everything the Bible would predict. You can find them, line for line, word for word. It's all there, which means the Bible's telling us God's view of things. The Bible is accurate. We need to understand what He's telling us. Why are we here? We're here to be loved. God loves us. He wants us to be loved, but He doesn't make us love Him. The whole story of Scripture is explaining why God loves us and is asking us to love Him. He could demand it, but He doesn't. He could make us do it, but He doesn't. He gives it to us as a gift. He gave us His Son. He gives us every opportunity that we have to return that love and to fill that love in our lives now, not just in the future, now. But we ultimately reject it. It tells us why we're here. It tells us why everything's happening. Why is there pain and suffering in the world? Why is there dinosaurs running around if they supposedly died off 65 million years ago? Because it wasn't 65 million years ago. Maybe a couple thousand. Right? That's why we have unfossilized dinosaur bones. That's why we can find hemoglobin in dinosaur bones. That's why we can find, on and on and on. That's why we have UFOs. That's why they're making hybrids. That's why people are being tormented by creatures. I would argue that probably if the church was doing its job, half of the people who are on medication right now could be cured of it.
Wow.
But we've locked them up in an insane asylum saying, hey, you're probably crazy. It's not that you have a demon or that you've been possessed or tormented. It's that you're crazy. Here's some medication. Go live stoned in this stoned state for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. We shove them under the rug because we're too afraid of the supernatural. We're too afraid of the paranormal, which means we're too afraid of God.
Wow.
Jesus said he was the stumbling stone. Something I wrestled with for years was the idea that Jesus was the stumbling block. He was the chief stumbling block. Why? Because we don't want to believe it. We don't want to believe that God can have a personal relationship with us. And so we reject all of that teaching. And the problem is, if the church is going to reject it, then who's going to be teaching it? We suffer when we don't do what God tells us to do. Western society did everything it did because it followed, at least on some level, the precepts of God. It adopted the 10 Commandments. It said, yeah, don't go killing one another. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. And just little teeny tiny bits of God into society, boom, we blew up. We learned more in the last 150 years than the last 6,000. Why? Because God's like, hey, do this and you'll be great. And we did just a little teeny tiny bit of it. And now we're trying to squash it out. Because God is truth. The way his word is truth, the way he teaches us is truth. So no. Are we a farm? No. Are we here to be loved? Yes. And we're here to be loved, and we're being told by an entire world system that we're not.
Wow, that's very well said. I received every bit of that, man. That was a very good explanation. But I noticed that you were talking about giving them medication. The entire state of California is on medication right now. Is stoned, so there's got to be a lot of psychological problems over there.
Dude, even the fish are stoned. They did a study a couple of years ago, and the salmon showed up as the flesh of the salmon had barbiturates in them because everyone's taking all these drugs, they're peeing them out, and it's getting to the water system. And so not only are they gobbling up, these little tiny plastic particulates, they're getting the drugs.
Wow.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I like a salmon likes to party too, but I'm like, at a certain point, we don't need fish who are high, right? What we need are people who are and I'm not anti-drug, right? I'm not necessarily going to say, hey, we don't need these things per se. Right, what I'm saying is we are clearly over medicating. Again, when someone breaks an arm, you give them a splint, but you don't put them in and leave them in that splint for their entire life. We don't say, hey, you broke your arm, let's put this giant metal casing on you that you have to drag around for the rest of your life. It's super heavy and really big and cumbersome. No, we say, okay, let's get your arm healed, and then you can move on. But with these drugs, man, we're saying, hey, you're unhappy today? Here's barbiturates for the rest of your life to keep you in the stone state so you don't feel depressed. You're still depressed. Right. That's the thing.
You just don't
you just don't feel it.
No,
and living numb is not the way. There's no way to live.
I have a real problem with that. A personal thing. One of my brothers was depressed, and so they prescribed him one of these drugs. I can't remember the name of it. Everybody takes it when they're depressed. And one day he decided, you know what? I'm done taking drugs, and he just quit. Well, he became suicidal and killed himself. Yeah, because that's the result of stone cold quitting those drugs. So it's like, I'm mad as hell when it comes to pharmaceuticals and drugging of America, because that's what's happening. I can't stand it. It's in our environment, in our water. Who knows, man? People got to have water purification sources out there to take care of some of that. But man, maybe, hey, you know what though? Now just dawned on me, because in my branding points, I pointed out that Rachel Maddow was fishing in Tennessee, and she was hitting the fish on top of the head with a lure. She can't really catch him. I wondered if those fish were stoned. Maybe that's why she couldn't catch them. Maybe. You know what? At this point, I believe just about anything. Well, particularly when it comes to Rachel Maddow. Yeah. All right. I am very sorry to hear about your brother. I mean, and I think that it really underscores how dangerous a lot of these pharmaceuticals are. They're messing with the brain, right? In Revelation, it says people will not turn from their magics. The word is pharmakia. It's pharmaceutical. It's where the word we get the word pharmaceuticals from. They are messing with the brain chemistry to make you numb to what's really happening in our lives, and that's not the way to live. Again, they're messing with the brain so much that people are getting suicidal over them. They can be taking the drugs and still become suicidal. I think a lot of these shooters, we always find they have emotional problems. They're always on these medications. I think they're homicidal as well. You can't jack with an organ as complex as the brain and expect and just be like, oh, it's fine. No, it was made. It needs to be balanced precisely to work. And again, my father was a mechanic. Something comes out of balance, it flies apart. We can't keep doing this. The church needs to rise up and say, look, let's love some of these people. Let's be together. You know what? Maybe it's not that everyone's some people are supernaturally oppressed, but some people just need to be loved. It's a hard life out there. There are people who've gone through some real hell, and they need to be loved. They don't need to be laughed at because they look different. They don't need to be shunned because they say something a little different than you, or that they just don't
behave the way you want to because they're not rich or they don't drive the right car. They need to be loved, and they need to be loved every day, and they need to know that you care. And you need to, and every single person out here, if you get nothing else from me at all, is that every person here can be a conduit of love, of the love of God. Again, as I said at the beginning, you can't love God and hate your neighbor. Wow. You can't. No. You cannot do it. It is impossible. If you love God, you have to love your neighbor. Mm-hmm. And loving your neighbor means being there for them when it's inconvenient to you. It means accepting them. So you can't love somebody in slices. Accept them for who they are. And maybe they do have problems. And you know what? I have had people in my life with some real problems that I couldn't fix. Some of them lived, some of them didn't. And the problem is, we can only do what we can do. We can't save everybody, but we can sure as hell try. Absolutely every day. Get out there and show that love to the person who needs it. Your neighbor is every human being you come across, because we're all brothers and sisters. We're all cousins. Everyone's a son of Ham, Shem, or Ham, Shem, or Japheth. We are cousins. Every one of us, white, black, yellow, even the Democrats are our cousins. They may be misguided. They may believe evil things, but they're still people who need to be loved and shown the love of God, because it's only the love of God that's ever changed the human heart.
Well said. Well said. Jason McLean, man, it's been a great time with you. I want to make sure, were you prepared to say anything else that we didn't cover? You can go right ahead. If not, just wrap it up with whatever you got to say.
Heck, I don't know if I haven't said anything, or I don't know what I have said. You know what? Just thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I've had a lot of fun. Everybody, there's a big world out there. It's bigger than you realize. If you don't believe in the Bible and you think I'm crazy, that's fine. But look into the literature yourself. If you are a Christian and you think I'm still crazy, that's fine. But look into the literature yourself. The world is bigger and weirder than you believe, and because God made it that way, and God wants you to be useful. He wants you to be out in the world, make that impact. Read these books, or don't. But at least don't just sit there. Don't be someone who just observes the world. Be a participant in it. God didn't call us to simply sit in churches on pews on Sunday. He didn't make you to listen to NPR on a Sunday. He made you to get out into the world and to understand it, to make it a better place. And we do that by teaching and loving the ones around us, learning in His Word, and observing the world around us.
Wow. Very well said. Jason McLean, I appreciate you coming on the Edge television broadcast. Can we have you back again sometime?
Hey, my time is, or your time is my time, man. I got nothing but time on my hands. So yeah, like I said, just give me a call. It's cerupapers.com, or you can go to jarofpaint.com. Jar of Paint basically is my catch-all for everything, whether it's art or whatever's happening on Ceru. Like I said, I hope to have another website with some biblical stuff on it, comics that can be shared for free. Evangelical comics, probably in the next month, maybe a little longer. It depends on how long it takes me to draw them. But like I said, cerupapers.com or jarofpaint.com.
All right, Jason McLean, I appreciate you being on the program. We'll have you back.
Appreciate you, man. We'll talk to you next time.
All right, bye-bye. All right, everybody, that was Jason McLean right here on the Edge television broadcast. This show will begin to replay. We'll put it together where the NSA hacked us off, man, right where we're talking about pterodactyls. And so we'll have the complete show up for you. We have it recorded here in the studio, so we're good to go there. We'll also put it up in our TuneIn radio playlist and podcast program as well. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Tonight's Randy Points, I say probably hit that one out of the park. It's going to be on my Facebook feed, so if you follow me on Facebook, you'll be able to re-enjoy it. You know what? I may stick it up there on YouTube so it can get banned, but because I kind of look forward to that. See who we got next week. I haven't locked in next week's guest, but we do got a couple guests coming up, and that next week's going to be Raymond Samansky talking about 50 Shades of Grays, not 50 Shades of Gray. 50 Shades of Grays, that is an alien. Then we're going to be having somebody who's also on our YouTube chat, Paul Shishi, talking. He was an alien abductee and UFO contact. If we haven't had a guest on the program you'd like to see, just drop me a line at edgeam@yahoo.com. You can find various contact links on the website, and you'll be a daisy if you do. Daniel Ott for The Edge. Bye-bye.